Hello, welcome to History Chats this afternoon. Just muted myself here. Hey, welcome to History Chats. We are, oh wait, let me get the right screen up here. Hey, there we go. Yeah, we're gonna talk about some maps, because it's March MAPness, which if somehow you're watching this and haven't seen this or any of the advertisement, we do maps stories in March because maps are pretty cool and they can tell us some interesting things. Today we're talking about a different kind of map than often what we use. It's interesting because maps as a concept are very useful from a historical perspective when you compare them, right? So we can look at a street map from 1920, and we can look at a street map of a community, 50 years later, 1970, and we can see how it's changed. We can see, whether that's, the boundaries, whether it's the names, whether it's, structures. We can look at other maps to see how property changes, like a plat map to see where like farms, who owns what and how that changes. We can look at, even like topographical maps or things like that, which you'd think that the topography of a community might not change over, the short time, like that mountain is still going to be there, or that the rock, the geology, the geology is not going to change. But, if you look at an earlier map of the same thing as what we use today, you're going to see different ways that our understandings and what we need to map have changed. So often maps are really useful from a historical perspective when we compare them. But sometimes there's one-off maps. I mean, you can kind of compare this to other things too, but as far as I know, this is the only time that this map was existed. I don't think they ever did another version of it. And specifically, it is this map. Or here's the physical map. It's a normal map size. As you can see, it is a map that was created as a practical guide to getting started from your new neighbor, First American National Bank. So First American National Bank, some of you, I'm sure that there's different levels here of understanding in memory of First American Bank. Some of you may not be familiar at all. It started back in like 1890 as the first German-American, no, it was not first, I think German-American National Bank, something like that. During World War I, they saw the writing on the wall and they changed it to First American to get rid of the German part of it. And ultimately, this is a bank that is going to be one of the most successful in central Wisconsin. And of course, with the name First American, and one of the interesting things is there's a little bit more of a very, very interesting take on branding for banks. For banks. We don't really think necessarily about a bank as having a brand compared to like a company that makes a thing that people are going to want to buy, but there absolutely is a brand for banks. And First American has, they kind of play off of this idea of the first Americans were the Native Americans, and so they use this, headdress, Native American head, as their representation, which in retrospect, wouldn't fly today, but at the time it was, not unusual. A lot of companies in this region made heavy use of Native American imagery, as part of their identity. And at least this is kind of a clever play on words, I guess. But anyway, by this point, this map here is, oh, by the way, some of you may not know all of that, but you might remember it being the place where you went and did Christmas carols. Whether it's this building, which is one of the original buildings they operated out of, or the First American Center, which is now BMO Harris, M&I Bank before that. It's gone through a lot of changes. But the decorations and the Christmas stuff is often a big time for that too. So you might have different aspects. You might be aware of First American in various ways, but this map isn't necessarily playing on that idea that you know what they are, because it's supposed to be an introduction, right? It's a practical guide to getting started. Hey, you've moved to town. This is a map that's going to give you everything you need to know about what you need to know about living here. So if we open it up to the inside, you can see the inside fold here. So it's got this interesting, it folds out and then folds out again. We'll get to the interior of that, but let's just start with this. This is what this looks like. So on the right, you can see a little bit of a welcome from Thomas Hudson, who is the, we'll talk more about him in a second. But the president of the bank and one of the big personalities that helped to develop it during his tenure. But on the left, you get this really interesting map, which is mainly the reason that I wanted to talk about this, which is this map. Now, it's worth noting, this is not the only map that's going to be in here. We'll talk about the other maps as they come up, but this is map number 1. And it's interesting, right? So I'm putting it on its side so we can see the full thing at once. It has on the right a little bit of a index, I guess. So basically what you can see here, so it's got this, right? And then there's a tab that you can pull. It's like a little pocket here, little envelope, and it kind of does this. And inside there's a card that has a bunch of triangles and dots, and those dots allow you to by moving things, you can say, okay, I want to know where the First American National Bank. It's not perfect, both because in the original and also my approximation of it here, but in theory, it's not really going straight. Maybe it is. If we wanted to see where, like, I don't know, the bus depot was. I don't think this is quite correct, honestly. I might have gotten something mixed up here. But I mean, you get the idea, right? So if the bus depot is down, I don't think the bus depot is down here, but maybe I'm wrong. I think that's actually supposed to be this. I suppose here, let me make a pointer, laser pointer, kind of downtown here, near the bus. That would make sense, I guess. Like I said, it's not perfect. It's sort of mass-produced. It's more of an interesting novel concept, and maybe over the years it hasn't aged as well as it could have in terms of its functionality. But it's an interesting concept, right? So by moving it around, you can find out where the pools are, and then you could look for the red line. And that would tell you, oh, this is where the pool is. It's kind of cool. Let's it's interesting because First American is one of these companies that has a lot of advertising, a lot of print stuff, and it's a lot of really cool stuff here. A lot of this makes sense. It's sort of like, hey, this is a helpful guide or things that you can use for. So these are the things we have loans for, right? Also, just as a note, First American State Bank, it's gone through some iterations. It's national, state. We're talking about the same place. Banks can be kind of difficult to parse sometimes because they all seem to have first national or national first or national state. State bank, there's not a lot of seconds. There's not a lot of regional banks. It's usually a name and then some version of that. But anyway, it's not important. Again, there's some interesting stuff here. These are some cards. Some of you may remember the weather stick that they had on top of the building. if you were, grew up in the 50s, 60s, maybe even to the 70s, there would be this big, thing, and there'd be a light on top, and it would basically tell you what the weather was going to be, before you got to see it. So you can see that they're doing some interesting stuff. They're trying to engage the public, and they're doing it some really interesting ways. I'm kind of blown away sometimes when I see a regional bank with like a newsletter that looks there's some really well designed and very like contemporary art that is being created. Maybe it's just the time period. Maybe everybody did this, but I don't think so. I don't think too many communities were necessarily going through it in this way, to hire somebody to do this kind of style of art to make things interesting. Again, this is a bank, so they don't need to do a newsletter talking about library trends, but they do because they want to be part of the community, and they want to show that they're current and up to date, so to speak. So let's talk about the other side of that fold here. So this is the welcome from Thomas Hudson. Now, Thomas Hudson is a really interesting guy. I'm going to bring up. I found an article from the 80s here talking. This is about him going to a reunion, but it talks about his life. He actually grew up in Chicago, was born in Chicago to a single mother, and he and his two brothers were shipped off to an orphanage because his divorced mother, who was kind of doing all the child rearing, just couldn't afford. A different time when they were doing that. Eventually, she was able to, make enough money to support them, and they got to move home. He spent a lot of his early years working. Seemed like he was a bright kid. He had, ambitions to be a chemical engineer. He was really good at chemistry and math and things. Unfortunately, it didn't really pan out. But he starts to work, in some financial, in the audit department of Marshall and Field Company, and kind of finds, he's pretty good at this, and goes off to college, doesn't manage to go to the institution that he wants to for the whole time because of the Depression. He wanted to go to University of Illinois at Urbana, but it just kind of didn't work out. So he went to junior college, started to make a career. Brief aside here, he gets married and starts his family, and then he has to go off and serve. I'm not sure exactly what he meant here, but he says that I had the honor of being the first pre-Pearl Harbor father in the state of Illinois to be drafted. So apparently, usually if you're a father, the breadwinner of a family, you could get deferment. But apparently his deferment his exemption, deferment? I don't know if that's the right term. His exemption came 8 days after he was drafted. So he did end up serving in the Navy, comes back after the war, ends up running a bunch of different companies, banks, as the president across Illinois, and then into Wisconsin, and here we go. And then in 1958, he is hired as to come on and work at First American, which he does. And he's going to oversee for the next 20 years a period of growth. It was a bank that had potential, and he grew it, and other people that were part of the effort here. It ended up becoming the 8th biggest bank in the state of Wisconsin, which is pretty big. Also, just, he wasn't just a guy who was involved in this. He had, involvement in a broader sense. Notably, one of the lasting impacts is he was one of the big, apparently the First American Center was said to be the house that Tom built. He was a big proponent of that, of trying to revitalize the downtown area and keep it relevant. And so the office building, First American Center, it's gone through some different names now that First American is no longer an entity. I guess I don't think I mentioned that. Eventually, First American National Bank is bought out by M&I, and then BMO Harris. So it has since stopped having that sort of national, like they don't have that Native American head in as their logo anymore, which is fair. That's kind of what happens. Anyway, let's get back to the map. So we open up the first fold, and then now we've got another fold that we can open up, and it has a couple more things. So I'm going to give them some letters here to help us keep track. A is pretty obvious. It will be obvious if you look at it. You can see that there's this indent here. That's the back of the card for the map, so that's what you pull out. Um, B and D are maps that we'll talk about, the rest of the maps. But let's do a quick look at C, because this is also interesting. Now, full disclosure, the only copy that we have isn't complete. You can see here that there's a little bit that somebody tore off the front. So I don't know what the first page would be. But this has some really interesting things because it goes through and it talks about, here are the major points. Hey, your first day, here's how to get here. You can get by car, here's the highways, by plane, here's the airports, bus, taxi, the location, here's where you can stay, here's how to get, where to buy a toothbrush, mail a letter, or cash a check. There's more information there. Things like radio and television. Hey, if you're moving from outside of the area, you might not know what to tune your radio to in order to get the station that you want to listen to. So here's a helpful guide. House hunting, Also, with the house hunting, they make a point of saying, by the way, we offer financing. If you need a loan, we can help you out, which is also part of this, of course. It's pitching them as a resource. But also things like, hey, pre-move countdown. Make sure, here's the contact information for the electric company, for the gas company, for the telephone, for the post office, all the things that you're going to want to do to make sure, all in one place that you need to contact to be ready when you move in. Here are the list of the schools in the area, so you can kind of get an idea of, where you might want to live. Here's where the churches and hospitals are. If you're looking for the Lutheran church or whatever denomination you are, like, here you go. Joining and belonging is a list of different societies, clubs, organizations. Your interests. If you want to look up the local Elks Club or get involved with I don't know, homemakers. You get the idea, right? They were pretty common at that point, and a big part of the socializing here. Fun things to explore and do. Again, here's some parks, here's some museums, things like that, and then more information. Again, they're trying to pitch this as, here is a resource that you can use to figure out what you need to do, and we're providing that. And this kind of plays out too. So on the left side, it folds out here. This is the map of the Wausau area. Now, it's very similar to other maps that were produced by the city of Wausau. In fact, that's what the base of this is. They did not commission this map. I'm almost certain, because it's almost identical to like other versions we have from the early 70s. Of course, the other versions don't have that Indian head logo down here. And there's some other stuff that's slightly different, but I'm sure that they just took an existing map. And again, it just kind of makes sense. This is the community that they're trying to pitch. You're moving here. Here's a street map that might be helpful. The version that's in the main with the pull tab, as I'll point it out as we get back to it, I'll show another image. Not terribly detailed in terms of the street layouts, just the major ones. So yeah. On the other side, you have the recreation, so a county map. And you think about, like, if I'm moving to a community, a city like Wausau, from out of the area, you probably want a little bit more of a broader look, which is what this provides. It does have, the highway networks, the state and county roads. It has the townships and the villages and the cities across the county. But again, like if I'm moving here to work for, I don't know, in the advertising for Crestline, or to be a actuary for Wausau Insurance, I probably don't need to know too much about the details here, but having a recreation, like this is the parks, if you want to get out of town, go to the Dells, or do a shooting range, go to, take your boat out. If you got a boat, go to DC Everest Landing. There's a lot of helpful stuff there too. Again, to try to give some context and kind of smooth the transition of coming to a community. And yeah, like I said, here's the first map here. There's a handful of streets, but it's not really intended to be that. But it is a novel thing. It is not something that we see very often. We typically, like I said, see a map as being here's a resource, but then it's part of it, I don't know. There's something interesting about the collective collection of this. That it's not just a map. It's not just a city map. It's not just a village or a county map. It's all of these things, and it's really designed to try to appeal to a person. And you can kind of get a sense of that, right? They're looking for people who are coming to the area from outside who most would need this. Not in the region, might not be familiar with these things. And also, families, people, there's a lot of pools here. Curling rink, Marathon Park, Fern Island, parks, pools, museums, Marathon County Historical Society is on here, library. Yes, they also have their own branches. They had a branch in Wausau, one up in Brokaw, and one in Rib Mountain. Obviously, Rib Mountain and Brokaw aren't represented here, but, you get the idea. Um, yeah, just kind of interesting to see the attempt here. And I don't know. I don't think that this is something that necessarily a bank today would see it as their need to produce something like this. There's something interesting about this period in which, First American Bank is not a chain bank. It's not one of, half a dozen banks that own all of the banks across the United States. In which case, I mean, there's co-ops, there's other, sort of things too. But I don't think that BMO Harris is going to like create something like this in the same way that First American. So and maybe they don't need to, maybe with the internet with other resources, you don't need to have something like this. So I don't know. It's just an interesting artifact of a bygone era. And that's one of the cool things that maps can provide. Just like photographs and, other resources do. Maps, they're more interesting than sometimes we might want to give them credit for, or might think of them as. I know it's a little quick one here. Usually I go about half an hour. Looks like I have about 20 minutes. That's all right. We'll, get around to some of the stuff. We have the rest of the month here. We've got some more maps. Part of the reason that I'm kind of also getting ready for the upcoming History Speaks that I'm going to be doing about the public transportation. Again, there'll be some maps thrown in there too, but that'll be later this month on March 25th. There's a quick plug for that. But yeah, in terms of, I just realized I did this whole thing as Gary Gisselman. Whoops. Let me fix that. There we go. Forgot to change that. Anyway, I'm Ben. If you're watching this and still confused, sorry about that. My mistake. Anyway, what was I talking about? Maps. That's right. So March MAPness, we're continuing. Next week, we're going to have a guest come in, doing some research into some cemeteries in Lincoln and Marathon County. This is a pin board. You'll see some of these that he put together. That'll be an interesting program here. So again, not just necessarily another kind of map that we might use, right? Sometimes maps are used, as we've talked about, to document things that are in existence, and sometimes they're very helpful for trying to make sense of the past by creating our own maps. And so this is going to be a great opportunity to illustrate this. And so we'll look forward to that next week. Yeah, in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful. Well, you know what? I'm a little early here. I'm just going to take a look and see if there are any questions. Maybe somebody pointed out the fact that I was Gary Gisselman or something. Maybe not. That's all right. Cool. Well, anyway, I hope you all enjoyed some stuff about the maps here, and yeah, we'll look forward to more maps next week. Meantime, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. All right.